Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to session 11 of the Nexus 2025 Interdisciplinary Conference. This session is focused on resilience therapy and change. I am your moderator. My name is Dr. Jackie Linder. I am the founder of Nexus 2025 and the conference chair. So we're going to hand it over to a pre-recorded presentation by Dr. Anna Risanen. Mental health support for post-secondary students focus on animal-assisted wellness and trauma-informed practices.
Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. My name is Dr. Anna Rissanen, and today I will tell you about research projects that I have been doing in the last year or so around mental health in our post-secondary and higher education student populations. Specifically, I will go through some examples of low barrier access services that we can have on campus, which are animal-assisted wellness, and also some awareness for what we can do as administrators and as professors around trauma-informed practices when we work with this student population. Unfortunately, the research highlights that in our Canadian post-secondary institutions, our students actually experience worsened mental health symptomology. And it is not just the stress of the studies, but it is experiences that they have within our institutions when they go through their post-secondary and higher education. Which means then that as administrators and professors, we want to have more awareness of how we can actually help students. One suggestion is to have low barrier access services such as animal assisted therapy on campus, in addition to the traditional counseling services that sometimes do have a longer wait times as well. When we look at the findings from research literature review that I have conducted, we can highlight some interesting points about student mental health. So if the student mental health is at the center of our conversation here, there are some personal factors and institution support related factors that can play a role in how we can help or worsen the student mental health. So when it comes to personal factors, the research findings suggest that students that have developed skills around grit and students that have internal self-determination will do better in higher education. They have more resiliency and more ways to help themselves. When the conference topic is resiliency, then the conversation around how do we help the students to develop that resiliency is important. Also, part of that resiliency awareness is the self-care practices and the wellness practices that the students have as their own personal approaches to how they can support themselves through the post-secondary and higher education. The other part of the story is the institution support. There is a good amount of research that looks at the availability of mental health support for students, but also in addition to that, we need to think about interdisciplinary low barrier support. And also the third conversation and the research that we need to conduct more going forward is what do we understand and know about trauma-informed practices in our classrooms and in our campuses as well, so that we can help those students who might experience trauma-related symptomology. When I look at the research literature review that I have conducted, there's different aspects to it. We can look at the service utilization research and look at the amount of services, and then also the types of students that look for the help within the campuses. So the research also focuses, as said, on the related personal factors in the students, so such as resiliency, grit, and self-care. And then another piece of the pie, so to say, is the student-educator characteristics and the relationships between the students and educators, so whether or not we offer trauma-informed approaches, and then also how aware are we as administrators and professors about needs that, for example, minority groups might have that look different than the majority groups in our campuses of students. Also, the campus atmosphere and the campus climate and the stigma in our conversations and in our discourse is still an important part of perspectives of mental health needs and barriers that we have. So the institutions still do have surprisingly many conversations within their professor and administrator groups that are based on stigma towards mental health. So students do hear that, and they would appreciate a different type of conversation. And then also students themselves can have judgment or bias toward mental health as well. So these are the different factors that affect how students have access to mental health supports, what kind of resiliency can they develop, and how willing are they look for the support on the campus. So my findings were that unfortunately the news is not great. Our students do struggle with mental health significantly. So we as institutions, administrators and professors can actually do data-based information collection and evidence-based decision making when it comes to supporting students. We do need to understand and gather feedback directly from students, what they are asking and what they might need when it comes to those mental health supports from us. So students do also report that they will reach out to their close circles. Thus, the professors, especially, will be then one of those people that they will reach out. So we can be prepared when we think about trauma-informed approaches as well, that we can offer that support to those students that will reach out to us. Also, another aspect of the research that was highlighted was that minoritized students, so the minority groups, do struggle more compared to majority groups, especially those that have experienced adversity already. So what that means is that maybe we can look into more targeted mental health services and advertisement for that population. Also, students do welcome more social activities and interdisciplinary supports when it comes to their mental health. That counseling services is not the only thing they are looking for. They really appreciate social connections, any kind of enhancement to their well-being, peer groups and activities, and also the animal assisted wellness programs are very well received by students. And also students do want training in grit and resiliency as well. They do recognize that there are tools that they can learn to help themselves, which means that students do welcome psychoeducation in coping mechanisms, how to develop grit and resiliency. They do want that training and education from the universities, and they would like to already start that in high school so that they are prepared for those challenges that they have to go through in their post-secondary education. And again, that lowering of stigma within not only in the institution, but within the student groups is an important part of the conversation as well. Also, there was a new etiology that came up in the research when it comes to adverse childhood experiences and discrimination that has affected on those young learners' mental health. So if we have a minoritized group and that minoritized group already has experienced discrimination and adversity, their mental health decline will be unfortunately more evident. And then what that means is that when we have students from minoritized groups and they might have higher AC scoring, then as mental health professionals, we can look into their stress vulnerability and their coping mechanisms in a different way, because likely they will have more sensitivity to stress that could lead into increased mental health distress as well. Also, good news is that this new etiology that was found in the research as well, that there's help actually from positive social interactions to this minoritized ACEs group as well. So we could look into targeted peer supports and activity groups that are helpful for this group specifically. And then, as said earlier, students do recognize that counseling services are available. They want professional, low barrier, low stigmatized, easy access counseling services. So we can look into stepped care and flexible care within the counseling centers as well. Can we do triage and easier access and consultation for students? And also group psychotherapy with lower access barrier. And also, as said, that targeted advertisement for those groups that will likely struggle more would be beneficial. So when we look at the recommendations from our research literature review, there was a couple of highlights there. So we want to continue promoting resiliency, grit, and self-care for students. They are aware of these needs, and we can provide psychoeducation and groups for those. Students do need to have access to those campus services. So students are reporting high levels of stress, loneliness, and exhaustion. And maybe we can have also outreach programs or targeted advertisement for those minoritized students, also students that have specific challenges with anxiety and antisocial behaviors, so that they would be more willing to utilize the services. Help-seeking barriers were related to healthy discourse, so that we have more positive campus climate for mental health discussions, and then that perceived stigma conversations should be still at the core of our conversations as well, so that we enhance positive social connections and peer support on campus. Minority groups do have a different need compared to majority groups. What that means is that maybe there is a way for us to then incorporate psychoeducation about adverse childhood experiences and trauma and those effects on especially socially isolated students who are in higher risk of mental health decline. So we do want to also include educators and professors in this conversation, so the professors are aware of the increased risk of mental health decline in this population, and how can we support educators to find trauma-informed practices, which are, for example, flexibility in deadlines, flexibility when people or students experience triggers or symptomology that makes it difficult for them to learn, that we have some flexibility and understanding for that. Then we also need more research on effectiveness on these interventions on diverse student populations, and also more research on the interdisciplinary low barrier wellness approaches on campuses as well. And overall campus support for that open communication about mental health is still important to continue reducing stigma and talking about and promoting well-being for all students. Future research suggestions seem to be around how do we as institutions, how do we as universities and educators and professors and administrators then increase the feelings of belongingness to social networks in our students. So what that means is that if the students don't see representation of their own cultural identity or their own ethnic background within their student population, but also importantly, if they don't see the representation in their leadership and in their professor population, they might not develop a sense that sense of belongingness to the campus social networks. So we do need to be aware of that can affect their academic performance as well. So we want to remember that subgroups do affect feelings of independence and development of identity and resilience as well. So cultural belongingness needs to be as part of our conversations as well. How do we maintain cultural belongingness and promote that in our students, between our students and our other campus members? Also, how as institutions do we increase training in resiliency, in grit, self-determination and self-care, so that students' well-being and life satisfaction will continue at least at the same level. That it wouldn't decrease as much as it does during the post-secondary experience. And how do we provide that education and those groups for students to learn about skills around resiliency, self-care, de-stressing? How can they take on more fun and pleasurable activities, and how can the campuses and campus environments promote that type of activity? And then when we think about the interdisciplinary supports, I have then a research program that looks into pets assisting with student success. PAWS as a cute name. These are actually dogs and cats that are available on campus for students to drop in sessions with them. And these benefits for these programs are that they actually can exactly target with low barrier access some of these isolated students or some students that are going through adversity or have experienced adversity in the past, so that this experience with the peers and the dogs and the cats can actually decrease their distress. And that's exactly what I found in my research as well. I have a distributed survey on campus for these participants and done so far qualitative data analysis. Currently, I'm also collecting quantitative data when it comes to level of stress and changes in affect, but that data is not ready yet. So I only have the qualitative data today to share with you. And students do report that the interactions with animals and peers actually help them, because then they have those low stress mental health breaks during the day, which then helps them to continue their studies, and their going to class feels easier for them as they have these little mental health breaks with the pets. And those interactions are good for them. They enjoy them. They report positive effects on them by reducing anxiety, making new friends, seeing others, and feeling better on campus. Future improvements as that they want more capacity, they want more sessions and more dogs. They think this program is wonderful, and they want more advertisement so that the more students have access to these sessions. So here we go, people, animals, less stress, less anxiety. It was so nice to see the pets and other peers, and they actually make new peer connections outside of that they maintain outside of the sessions as well. The other research that I had was trauma-informed services on campus. So I distributed a survey to hear from students how they experience trauma-informed practices when it comes to teaching and learning or in their counseling services. And students do report that the sessions that they receive from counseling services are helpful. Students do report that they have high levels of stress and anxiety. Some students report PTSD symptomology, and they would be looking for some help that would be more easily accessible, low barrier, quick access help when it comes to their symptomology with PTSD. If they experience that on campus, they would like to have some groups as well that they can participate in. So again, they want walking appointments when they have symptomology that's challenging during the day when they're on campus. They want workshops, psychoeducation, and they really welcome other health activities, exercise groups, for example, that they can then participate to maintain their wellness. What they list as barriers to access is long wait lists still. They also experience culture and language barriers when it comes to counseling services specifically. They still experience shame and stigma around mental health on campus. And as said, they want psychoeducation and advertisement of services and skills that they can develop to help themselves as well. When it comes to trauma-informed practices in the classroom and instructors, they appreciate that professors are understanding, that professors can help them by extending their deadlines and being more flexible in grading. But they do also understand that trauma-informed practices are not the professor's responsibility as they teach, but they would appreciate some resources and links to get more information about where they can go to get some help with their symptomology. So again, the students are asking for help. They have high levels of anxiety and stress, and they want someone to talk to and support them on campus on a daily basis, if needed, with walk-in supports as well. And self-reflection for this is that as an administrator and a professor and registered provisional psychologist, it is interesting to read through this research when I've been teaching almost 20 years. And it's kind of comforting to know that students are looking for connection with us, and we can help them by providing support and resources to them. And here are my resources. Thanks everyone for your attention.
Okay, so our next presentation is a live presentation, and it's titled Power and Prejudice, the Impact of Dominant Discourse on Male Victims of Adult Sexual Assault. Taylor, if you could go ahead and load your slides. Okay, here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Taylor, and my research looks at who's missing from the conversation about sexual assault and why that matters. Quick content warning before I begin. This presentation does include discussions of sexual assault, trauma, and suicide. Please take care of yourself and feel free to step away if you need to. When we think about sexual assault victims, we typically picture a particular gendered pattern, a female victim and a male perpetrator. When a man experiences sexual assault, this immediate thought imposes a gendered filter to how they see themselves, how they think about the abuse, and their fears about what others will think about them if they open up about it. By applying intersectional feminist and discourse analysis frameworks, my research examines the roles that gender, power, and prejudice play in silencing male victims and what happens when an entire population of survivors is excluded from the conversation about violence and healing. In order to understand how dominant discourse impacts male victims, it's important to first be clear on what dominant discourse is. Michel Foucault explains that dominant discourse is the prevailing way we think about and spread information about a particular system, institution, or topic, and the relationship that has to power. By looking at what is said or understood about a particular subject, as well as what remains unsaid or ignored, we can begin to understand how discourse doesn't just describe reality, it plays a role in shaping it. So, when we frame sexual assault as something that happens to women by men, that's not plainly reflecting statistics. It's actively shaping who gets believed, who receives services, and whose experiences are studied. So, let's talk about hegemonic masculinity, a key player shaping the discourse about male victims. Hegemonic masculinity is essentially the cultural script outlining what it means to be a real man. Think strong, powerful, sexual, and definitely not emotional, vulnerable, or anything classified as feminine. It's the societal archetype of manliness for comparison and internalized differently by the individual. And masculinity itself, to be clear, is not inherently the problem. In fact, exploring healthy masculinity with male victims can be a really important piece of their healing journey. But these more rigid and the hegemonic gender norms have consequences. They often excuse violence and homophobia. We've all heard boys will be boys. And they can play a big role in shaping how male victims understand what happened to them. To fully understand the impact of dominant discourse on male victims, we need to look beyond gender for a moment to understand compounding factors at play. Kimberly Crenshaw used intersectionality to explain how Black women experience compounded sexism and racism that can't be understood by looking at the oppression faced by women or Black people as independent groups. The same is true here. When we only look at gender, we can miss how factors like race, sexual identity, disability, and class contribute to unique vulnerabilities. Taking this more inclusive approach reveals how the same systems of power that silence and oppress women also silence and oppress men and gender diverse victims. So let's establish something fundamental. Male sexual assault does happen. About 12% of total police reported sexual assaults in Canada involve male victims, and about 15% in the UK, just as examples. However, it is well established that sexual assault is significantly underreported to police across the board. For male victims, factors like hegemonic masculinity norms, fears of discrimination or homophobia, and the overall invisibility of male sexual assault create additional barriers to coming forward. Survey research, while still not perfect, offers us a bit of a fuller picture. For example, up on the screen here, I have data from Coulter et al. 2017, a study that looked at the prevalence of past year sexual assault among college students in the United States. By analyzing data from over 71,000 students across 120 post-secondary schools, the authors observed that sexual assault happened to people of all genders, but those belonging to marginalized communities faced disproportionate past year sexual victimization. When we look at their data, we can see that for cisgender men, those who were gay, bisexual, or unsure of their sexuality, as well as those who are Black or of other race ethnicity, experienced disproportionate rates of past year sexual assault compared to white and heterosexual men. Further, transgender people experienced higher rates of past year sexual assault than cisgender men or women of any sexual orientation. And Black transgender people represented the highest rate of past year sexual assault at 55.6%. Though more research is needed still, these prevalence rates contradict the idea that sexual assault only happens to women and highlight the necessity of applying an intersectional lens to prevalence research. So, how does dominant cultural discourse systematically impact male victims of adult sexual assault? Further, what are the mechanisms of these impacts? What are the observable consequences? And critically, what can be done about it? Let me introduce you to male rape myths. These are part of the many misconceptions about male sexual assault, and the following are just some of the main categories of these myths that have been identified in the existing research. Denial myths are the beliefs that male rape is rare, impossible, or only happens in prison. Blame myths include victim blaming attitudes, claim that victims must have wanted it or that they should have fought back. Trauma myths center the ideas that men are less emotional and thus would be less traumatized by sexual assault. And sexuality myths encompass problematic assumptions about the sexuality of both perpetrators and victims. These myths are significantly influenced by hegemonic masculinity norms and are similarly internalized to different degrees depending on the individual. They're also simply not true. Male sexual assault happens in many contexts beyond prison, including through coercion, abuse of power dynamics, domestic violence, or through alcohol or drug facilitated sexual assault, just as examples. Regarding sexuality myths, it's important to hold two truths. First, heterosexual men can be both victims and perpetrators of male sexual assault, and queer, trans, and racialized individuals experience disproportionate targeting. Male victims can experience freeze and fawn responses. And like any survivor, they run significant risk of developing trauma symptoms, PTSD, suicidal ideation and behaviors, as well as relationship, sexual, and economic consequences post-assault. Ultimately, these myths influence the shame, stigma, and silencing experienced by male and masculine identifying victims and their resiliency post-assault. The gendered pattern of sexual assault excludes male victims from the majority of conversations about sexual assault. The limited research or media that does shine a light on male victims predominantly focuses on white, heterosexual, and gay men. When we then start to look at who is left out of that picture, we find many of the people most disproportionately targeted for sexual assault who also happen to be those who experience the greatest barriers to support. This is because sexual assault is fundamentally about power. By interviewing professionals working with male survivors, Javade 2018 found that misogynistic and homophobic hatred and objectification were significantly represented in the accounts of these assaults, and presented the argument that male-on-male sexual assault can function as a type of homophobic hate crime. Similarly, Medjugorje et al. 2021 came up with the term transphobic rape to describe how hate crime sexual assault can take the form of gender policing, where perpetrators justify their behavior as a means of punishing transness as a type of transgression or offense against traditional gender norms. And further studies have shown that the visibility of one's transness, particularly for Black trans people, puts them at greater risk of this type of hate targeting. Further, marginalized survivors, their exposure to external stigma and prejudice and how that is internalized can contribute to chronic stress, and that can compound trauma and overall impacts to their mental health, as well as physical health. I could spend a lot more time here, but the bottom line is that if sexual assault is about power, then we must address the systems that distribute and withhold that power. To recap, hegemonic masculinity, male rape myths, and systems of power and prejudice create and compound barriers to disclosure and support for male and gender diverse victims. Male victims face many of the same internal barriers as female victims, like shame, self-blame, fears of not being believed, etc. Structural barriers to support are things like high costs, time constraints, and insurance limitations that are faced by many people seeking support. However, unique structural barriers these populations face include limited to no services specifically offered to male victims, which may also then require long wait times, long travel distance, or may be exclusive of trans or non-binary people. These limited services may also not be culturally competent or LGBTQ plus informed, which can create further barriers or risk of secondary victimization for minority victims. These structural gaps are often the result of systemic barriers. For decades, women and feminist groups have had to fight the criminal justice and healthcare systems for the sexual assault services that we have today. But the legacies of patriarchy, sexism, homophobia, racism, and transphobia still show up when we look at who gets left out or even further harmed from these types of services. Here's the core challenge. For someone to seek help for sexual trauma, they need to feel safe enough with another person to be vulnerable and disclose their experience. In this way, healing is inherently relational. But hegemonic masculinity says victimization and vulnerability are feminine, shameful, and unmanly. Male rape myths tell survivors that they won't be believed, that they'll face homophobia and judgment instead of support. And when we ignore intersectionality, we further silence those whose experiences are shaped by multiple overlapping systems of oppression. So that was a lot of information, but what can we do about all of this? Well, we can increase the amount of services offered for male and gender diverse victims and try to make them more accessible by offering them online or offering things like sliding scale options. Research has also shown that group therapies or peer support programs can be especially effective for this population at reducing shame through relationship and shared experience, as well as they can be more accessible. If you're in a supporting role, police, healthcare, mental health, seek out gender inclusive sexual assault training. Evaluate your existing procedures for responding to disclosures to ensure that they're intersectional, culturally competent, and gender inclusive. We also really need more research on this topic overall, and especially on trauma-informed interventions for male victims that consider and are attuned to the role that masculinity norms play in shaping survivor experiences post-assault. And for all of us, we are seeing a growing spotlight on men's mental health. So let's talk about male sexual assault. Call out male rape myths when you see them. Check on your male and trans friends. Despite all the barriers to disclosure, the research shows that when survivors are able to disclose these experiences in a safe and caring way, that it plays a fundamental role in their recovery. We can also support organizations already doing this work, partner with Indigenous to us LGBTQ+, men's health, or other cultural community organizations already leading the way. By building collaboration between community, criminal justice, and healthcare services that respond to sexual assault, we can increase awareness and access. In summary, when we perpetuate myths that deny male rape, blame victims, and minimize trauma, and make assumptions about sexuality, we're not just spreading misinformation, we're shaping how survivors see themselves, how they cope, and whether they seek help. An intersectional feminist lens shows us this. When we frame sexual assault as only a women's issue, we silence vulnerable victims who don't fit that narrative, and we place the entire burden of fighting against these systems of oppression that fuel perpetration onto women's shoulders. What I'm proposing is a categorical shift. If we look at sexual assault through the lens of power, as violence that can be committed against anyone, but often targets our most vulnerable, it becomes everyone's responsibility to stand up and be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I have scribbled down many notes. This is my area of work, so I was very interested in that presentation. Thank you. Our next presentation is pre-recorded. It comes to us from Ankara, Turkey. Something a little bit unusual about this presentation is that we will hear a computer voice doing the presentation because this presenter is a Turkish speaker who used technology to convert his presentation into English on our behalf. It is called An Examination of the Effect of Psychology on Mind Management in the Context of Being.
Title: An Examination of the Effect of Mind Management on Psychological Formation in the Context of Existence. Psychological formation. Dear Chairperson, participants, and guests, before beginning my speech, I extend my sincere greetings to all of you. The subject of our paper is the effect of the relationship between mind and knowledge on psychological formation. Knowledge is a part of psychology. It exists between being and thought. When knowledge functions correctly between existence and thought, the power of the mind emerges. There is a direct and essential connection between knowledge and happiness. The human mind reaches knowledge about existence through concepts. According to Al-Farabi, knowledge is not to influence others but to provide understanding about reality, to comprehend the ultimate causes of all beings. For Al-Farabi, true and certain knowledge is that which remains valid at all times. Thinking the opposite of true and certain knowledge creates contradictions in the mind and prevents access to mental power and mental existence. In our paper, we have established the relationship between knowledge and the mind, taking as a basis only those truths that are certain at all times. Our research is not limited to a single holy book, rather, it examines the true and certain knowledge found in all sacred texts. In this context, the aim is to explain how mental strength arises and to establish its positive effect on psychology. Within the social sciences, the question of what constitutes the real world and how one can attain such knowledge has always remained relevant. Can reality be reached through mental consciousness, or only through a materialistic approach based on existence? Knowledge does not merely wander on the surface of things, it moves within and through the depths of existence. It can only be revealed through systematic and specific perspectives. Knowledge perfects our inner life, it elevates humanity from the realm of shadows to the realm of reality. The production of knowledge is a mental act. The development of the relationship between mind and knowledge forms the essential dynamic of human transformation. Human strength depends on the development of this relationship. An uncontrolled mind prevents us from understanding the world, the universe, and ourselves. When the mind builds its defenses with knowledge, it ceases to be a servant and becomes a master. Humanity reaches the summit of wisdom and attains the power of progress. Through effective struggle against unwanted thoughts and emotions, one reaches the knowledge of the perfect being. Building mental defense means enhancing mental competence. This allows a person to better understand their own power and the order of the universe. In the pursuit of the knowledge of reality, material foundations are not sufficient, one must rely on knowledge that strengthens the struggle of the mind. As the relationship between mind and knowledge develops, knowledge itself renews. The essence of renewal is the production of knowledge that helps us understand the world, the universe, and ourselves. When this relationship between mind and knowledge is realized, it creates unity between human beings and the real world. The human being rises to the highest level of existence and can comprehend the ultimate causes of all things. Mental knowledge production is based on lived experience and conceptualization. Knowledge grants us the condition and possibility of spiritual existence. Without faith in personal renewal, no new knowledge can arise. Insufficient understanding prevents personal renewal, for it produces structural errors within the mind. Such weakness makes one unable to resist mental laziness and false beliefs, thus preventing success and happiness. A person must gain experiences that provide a realistic and positive self-perspective. Reading the inspiring works of those who have experienced truth helps illuminate the dark, unexplored areas of our inner being. Just as a person enslaved by passions can be influenced by the negative atmosphere of a place, those with exceptional mental refinement remain unaffected. The mind can be both the cause of slavery and of freedom. A mind polluted by desire creates bondage. A pure mind, cleansed of passion and ignorance, creates freedom. One must choose, a pure mind or a polluted one. No one can make this decision for you, just as another person's medicine cannot heal you. Knowledge that leads the mind to purity reveals something subtle within. The person begins to perceive the incredible simplicity of the world and develops the will to acquire the necessary abilities. In the presence of purified atmosphere, the thoughts and emotions of the astral mental world are sensed and perceived. Human existence depends on the subtle life energy felt within us. When nourished by the inspiring words of sacred texts, this subtle energy develops, enabling us to think beyond matter. Instead of repeating painful thoughts, one should repeat prayers, mental missiles, and sacred phrases that uplift the spirit. In this way, the illuminating light of wisdom drives away attacks upon the mind, creating powerful mental defenses. Mental defense built upon strong faith is intellectual conviction, the attainment of willpower. Our will, charged with inner strength, protects us from harmful mental intrusions. The human being is not evil. What is harmful are the unwanted thoughts and feelings that intrude upon the mind. Every being carries life within itself. The best mental defense consists of words that deeply touch the heart and intellect. For these words to settle firmly in the mind, one should repeat them aloud or softly for several minutes. When you fully immerse yourself in these affirmations, you can think of nothing else. One must catch and reject every sentence that weakens mental defense, decisively saying no. Just as you kick away a stone in your path, you must reject every harmful thought with determination. When this will is established, unwanted thoughts can no longer affect you. For a while, you become free of them. Mental defense creates pure awareness, a fortress of the mind guarded by inner power. Poisonous thoughts will no longer dare to enter this fortress. Understanding that the development of mental defense and willpower is the path to happiness is crucial. Without true knowledge, no mental defense can be built. True knowledge allows interaction between the mind and the subtle environment, leading to a new perception of the world, seeing the unseen within the seen. Those who sustain mental defense catch the subtle mental current flowing at the astral level. Inner fears vanish, evil spirits are powerless and cannot interfere with human beings. However, pride and the sense of superiority arising from inner fear are the real danger. The wisdom contained in sacred texts removes such fears, awakening humans from their material sleep. To read and contemplate these spiritual heights, so close to truth, is essential. Controlled thoughts and emotions through mental defense lead to deep focus. It is not uncontrolled thoughts that govern humans but their own will. Through imagination and mindful attention, one avoids things that weaken mental defense. Knowledge expels unwanted thoughts and feelings, giving birth to a purified and strengthened mind. The mind ceases to be a cruel master and becomes a faithful servant, the rediscovery of the lost pearl within. This lost pearl is what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven, Buddha called parinirvana, Ramana Maharshi called self-realization, and Islam defines as finding one's true self. In mental defense and self-realization, one must study and reason logically. Rather than sanctifying one's life blindly, one should seek its inner meaning with sincerity. Sanctifying life leads to dogmas and sectarian divisions. True mental struggle is a spiritual consciousness that leads to divine awareness and peace. Therefore, one must continue in the fire of mental struggle until the inner strength matures. As long as attachment to material possessions persists, the mind cannot be liberated. The problem lies not in possessions but in our attitude toward them. Attachment binds a person like an animal tied to a stake. To awaken to a higher consciousness, one must free oneself from these bonds and return to one's inner homeland. The external world, being unreal, must be transcended, just as one removes heavy clothing on a hot day. Mental struggle always leads to self-awareness and inner peace. When the mind is cleansed of obsessive activities, and disordered lifestyles are changed, knowledge from sacred texts or the writings of successful people becomes like seeds falling on fertile soil. After breaking the astral mental chains, one must strive toward the spiritual realm. The wisdom in sacred writings magnetizes the mind and strengthens intuition. Since a truer world exists, we must make the effort to reach it. Conclusion: according to both Eastern and Western sacred teachings, happiness is found in the unseen realm. A person who attains inner strength through mental defense is awakened among humankind, one who has achieved self-resurrection. This awakening is the state of consciousness that perceives subtle messages of existence. In the silence of lasting inner peace, one perceives everything from a different perspective. Behavior, emotions, and thoughts become reflections of this inner harmony. Fear and disharmony within vanish, the person becomes harmless to all beings, pure in intention and action. Through true knowledge, the human being transcends the mind and discovers the stainless key that opens the gate to the real world, the key to tranquility.
Okay, it looks like the video cut off without the end. That's okay. We will move on to the next video, which is titled More Than Luck, Cultivating a Resilient Mindset. And it is brought to us by one of our colleagues in Victoria, Canada, Dr. Jacqueline McAdams.
Welcome, everyone. On to my presentation entitled More Than Luck, Cultivating a Resilient Mindset, Navigating Life and Adversity. My name is Dr. Jacqueline McAdam. I'm an instructor at City University in Victoria, BC, and I'm also in private practice. It's a pleasure to be here with you at the Nexus 2025 Interdisciplinary Conference. Today, I'm going to present on my work. I'm going to specifically present a framework that I've developed that reflects the learning over the course of my career. It is also the basis of a book that I've just written. Excuse me. I want to start by giving you a little bit of background, just a little bit of background. For most of my life, I've been fascinated by people, and I remember a pivotal moment when I was about 10 upon reading a book by a woman named Mary McCracken. And as she writes, she says it's a story of a teacher with a listening heart who learned how to understand her children's private hell of anger, confusion, hurt, and tragic loneliness. It's an inspiring, ultimately triumphant story of her no-hold-bars war against the darkness of their lives, and how she searched for and found the individual key to set them free. I was hooked. I wanted to know how to set more people free from their darkness. I wanted to know what made the difference, what helped people thrive. So just briefly, and only briefly, because I'm not 29 and I have had quite an extensive career, I began my career on the west coast of Canada in Victoria, and I specifically worked with children in difficult circumstances, children and youth. And I was really started to be puzzled by why some children thrived and youth thrived in the face of adversities and others didn't. And this quandary, this curiosity, expanded once I started working in Africa in the early 90s. My first master's was done in Nairobi, Kenya, and I helped to develop a work experience, personal development program for those living and working on the street, and for those living in one of the largest slums in the world at that time, called Mathare Valley. These young people had hope, they had resilience, unlike those I'd experienced in Canada. Although they were economically disadvantaged, they didn't seem to be psychologically disadvantaged, and the reverse seemed to be true of those I worked with in Canada. Following my time in Kenya, I worked in Rwanda, and once again, although it seemed unjust to be curious about such a thing as the resilience of those that overcame and were able to thrive beyond the Rwandan genocide, it was apparent that some actually did thrive, despite the odds. I later moved to Ethiopia with my family and started studying those that were living in displaced persons camps. This led to my interest and at the foundation of my PhD, which looked at coping and adaptation for children from 9 different war zones throughout Africa. I once again wanted to know why were some able to thrive in the face of adversities and others were not. I was also limited by some of the theoretical frameworks that I'd learned in my undergraduate degree and my master's. The teachings of Freud and Piaget didn't quite transfer to those that I was working with in Africa. Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory helped me understand the multitude of different risks and protective factors that impacted those I worked with in Africa and those I worked with in Canada. It reminded me that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and that resiliency is the interplay between risks and opportunities. My research also helped me understand the importance of protective opportunities. Oftentimes, I could tell more about how somebody would do, not by the risks that they encountered, but by the abundance of protective opportunities that they possessed in their lives. And those were both internal and external. There isn't enough time to go into all the different protective factors and opportunities that are highlighted in the literature, but I do discuss them in my book if that's of interest to you. So my book really showcases 7 fundamental things that I believe make a huge difference and upon which my research illustrated made a huge difference. Perception, passion, strength of service, proactive opportunities, comfort and discomfort, networks of support, and sense of self of others. And today I'm briefly going to highlight those different areas. And I say briefly in the essence of time. And if you're interested, I expand on them in more detail in my book. So the power of perception is, how do we take in the information that's around us? How do the senses, the feelings, the thoughts, our exposure to different experiences, how are they created and how are they informing us, and how do they sit within our mind? So in this section, I look at behavioral triggers and priming, and I look at classical conditioning and operant conditioning. I also discuss the concept of those that are cup half full and those that are cup half empty. Oftentimes we think that those are cup half full have a huge advantage, but it's been my experience that sometimes optimism and hope can get in our way. And I use the image of a tree full of thorns, and the optimist focuses on the one small rosebud on the tree. Optimist seems to downplay the negative and increase the positive. And this is where we can get stuck in optimism and hope. And so helping people look at their optimism and maybe the cognitive biases within their optimism can be really helpful to help people address their perceptual reality. So in each section, in each portion of the framework, I'm going to try and give you actionable interventions or applications that you can take away. So here, I invite you to help people challenge their perceptions, challenge their distorted perceptions through helping them understand behavioral triggers and the emotions behind those behavioral triggers and the cognitive biases that might be holding them back. So passion and purpose. We can all think of people that had immense passion. I've just listed a few here, and how their passion and purpose has impacted our world. Some of us, and most of us, will not experience the same type of passion as Jane Goodall or Viktor Frankl or Nelson Mandela or Rosa Parks. But it doesn't mean that the small joys that we experience by going out and to the gym or going out to partake in an activity we like is not equally valuable. Passion was a huge part of my parenting practices, and I encouraged my children to find places that they felt comfortable. In my chapter, I talk about the work and the life of Cooper Rust, a woman I often stay with in Nairobi, and the passion that was the basis upon which she started a ballet school in Kenya. So just encouraging those that we're working with to find something that they enjoy helps us cultivate a mindset of passion and increases our sense of resiliency. So the strength of service. Service has been shown to make a huge difference, whether it's volunteering, whether it's partaking on a board, whether it's helping a neighbor. There are different kinds of services, both formal and informal. And interestingly enough, informal service is found to make the biggest impact both in ourselves and others. Those random acts of kindness that are unexpected seem to increase those feel-good hormones in the brain in a much different way than acts of services that are more structured and predictable. So supporting someone to take up a volunteer job, oftentimes with the people I work with, I'll say, what are you doing in your community? And if the answer is none, I encourage them to volunteer at a music fest or invite their neighbor over for dinner. Service, as I said, can be formal or informal, and sometimes it's as simple as baking some cookies and taking them to work. Service is also the aspect of doing unto others. It's an extension of kindness. So proactive opportunities. And I still didn't get the T off of that, opportunities. Oops. Perfectionism is not something that we all have to strive for in our quest for a resilient mindset. So proactive opportunities, what are proactive opportunities? They're opportunities that we don't expect. They are not things that are happening in our lives. They're things that happen when the going gets tough and we figure out how to create something that was unexpected. I call it the power of the ask. There are places in our lives where we have to seek out and ask. In my study, I talk about a woman who has to ask the officials in Rwanda for support after her brother dropped in a fire. And she says, there was no room for being shy. I had to save my brother. So proactive opportunities require us to be self-efficacy. They required our self-efficacy. And I, as I say, call it the power of the ask. And when you work with those and you invite them to ask, many are scared of the ask. And I invite you to share this quote. If you fail, never give up, because fail means first attempt in learning. End is not the end. In fact, end means effort never dies. And if no is an answer, remember no means next opportunity. This is a quote from the 11th president of India. And I invite you to share that with those that are scared of the ask, are fearful of the ask, are worried about the consequences. Asking can open doors for us that we don't expect. The next area is comfort and discomfort. Taking a risk, and I look at this picture of my son, he's uncomfortable, but he's not taking a risk. And comfort in discomfort is risky. It's the risks that happen to us that we don't anticipate. It doesn't feel great, but comfort in discomfort allows us to move forward. Sometimes we need to sit with the discomfort. We need to be grateful for what we had, savor what we have. And in this chapter, I look at the feeling of grief and how grief can overwhelm us, and some of the places that grief takes us, and how important it is to move out of that grief and know that nobody does it alone. And you might be surprised with the outcome when you reach out and get out of yourself. The next area that I found incredibly important is connection. Social capital, I talk about it, and it's our ability to create a sense of belonging, to trust, and to feel safe in the relationships, to create networks of support. And in this chapter, I create levels of connection that help us understand how do we cultivate those relationships that are going to be the people that we can call at 2 a.m. And we look at the reciprocity and the attunement we have to those people. And in the last section, I look at how important it is to understand ourselves. And resilient understand the importance of self, the importance of differentiating themselves from whatever's going on, about putting our oxygen mask on before others. Most of us talk about how the outside is affecting us, but really, those with a more resilient mindset look at how the inside needs to help us deal with the outside. We need to work from the inside out. So in the essence of time, I just want to review and say thank you for your interest in my work. Don't hesitate to reach out either through my contact on my website, or you can order my book. And remember that perception, passion, service, proactive opportunities, comfort and discomfort, networks of support, and sense of self can make a huge difference in how we cultivate our own resilient mindset and those that we work with in our practice. Thank you again.
Okay, so I will say thank you for that wonderful presentation. We are happily running about 20 minutes ahead of schedule, So we had a colleague from Mexico yesterday who was having technical difficulties and was not able to join us at his scheduled time. So we're going to proceed with playing his video now, and then we will update the conference agenda to show this modification. It is called Sustainable Pedagogy in French Language Education, Building Resilience Through Practice.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raphaël Hubert Elie-Sebir, and I'm French. I'm teaching French as a foreign language in the University of Colima in Mexico. Today, I will present how we integrate sustainable pedagogy into French language education and how this helps build resilience among learners. The title of the presentation is Sustainable Pedagogy in FLE, French Language Teaching, Building Resilience Through Practice. In the second slide, we are going to talk about context and rationale. We are living in a period marked by climate crisis, economic instability, and growing social inequalities. These challenges require us to rethink education. Education for sustainability has emerged as a key dimension for building resilient societies. In this context, language education offers far more than grammar and vocabulary. It can become a transformative space where students develop awareness, critical thinking, and responsibility. In the slide 3, we are going to ask, what is education for sustainability? Education for Sustainability, or EFS, is a holistic approach that connects environmental, social, and economic dimensions. It promotes critical thinking, ethical responsibility, and collective well-being, encouraging learners not only to understand global challenges, but also to imagine and contribute to sustainable futures. Why in language education? A lot of people say, how can you work sustainability in French teaching? And I say, well, it's pretty easy. Since I don't want to teach grammar and vocabulary all day long, and because I think it's maybe not useless, but it's not the better way to learn a language. So languages shape how we describe the world and how we relate to others. Because linguistic and cultural diversity is rich in perspectives, language classrooms naturally become ideal spaces to discuss sustainability. Through dialogue, comparison, and intercultural learning, students can connect local and global issues in meaningful ways. What is our objectives and of our approach? Our pedagogical approach has several goals: to foster ecological awareness and critical reflection. That is fundamental for us because in the society we're living in France, for example, in Mexico, the context is so difficult to apprehend. We've got to foster critical reflection, to know how to discuss, how to take decision. No? We've got to develop learner autonomy and creativity. Creativity is fundamental too, because a teacher must always look for how to teach different people. All the people we have in front of us are different. We have several groups, and the groups evolve. It's quite difficult. We got to have a lot of creativity to encourage social responsibility through collaborative work, and to reinforce linguistic competence by embedding learning in authentic, meaningful context. As a learner, I always learn languages just with images and repetition, vocabulary, never with meaningful context. And I can remember I was learning Russian, and I met Russian people, and I, I stay just like this in blank. I couldn't say anything. I spent 3 years of my life learning Russian, and the day I have to speak with Russian people, it was very the cornerstone for me. I said I won't be a teacher like the teachers I have when I was a learner. I have to look something else for something else, to look for something different, more meaningful. The slide 6 presents the pedagogical framework. We always work on project-based learning. We rely primarily on project-based learning. Students engaged in real-world tasks. I know I don't live in France. I can say you're in France, and now, but we can reproduce something where the exchange, where the communication, the dialogue are all in French and in a French cultural context. So students are engaged in real-world tasks that require planning. They have to plan their learning, researching, producing, and reflecting. It's not just repeat after me, fill in the blanks. No. These projects integrate language, cultural, and sustainability themes, allowing students to act, communicate, and think more deeply about their social and environmental impact. I am going to give 3 very simple examples, but it's kind of the successful projects that we have, and students can choose about, I don't know, we have a kind of menu of 25, 27 projects, and students can choose some of them, and the first that is always chosen is a sustainable cuisine project. Cuisine, cooking, and friends are always related, no? Sustainable cuisine is a kind of no meat cuisine and creative cuisine. No? In this activity, students prepare vegetarian or seasonal meals. We are living in Mexico, and we have a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, but we can choose from all the year long. So we are choosing vegetarian and seasonal meals. They use French to explore food systems, discuss responsible consumption, and share recipes. The outputs include dialogues, cooking demonstration among students, but we invite the direction, we invite other faculties members to come and to try and to give us feedback. We share recipes, we have oral presentation, we have podcasts, cooking podcasts, for example, where people try to not only to give the recipe step by step, they give the explanation, the historical background of the recipe, and they try to explain their feelings, how they feel when they cook, how they feel the chill, and maybe it may be not that impressive, but in Mexico a lot of men, guys, young boys don't want to cook. So now it's for girls, it's for my mom is cooking for me. So to have a bunch of guys, young boys, adolescent people, teenagers who are cooking, it's pretty impressive. They wash the plates, they wash the glasses, things they don't do in their home. It's pretty fine. It's a beautiful integrity to integrate people. And after they made reflective writings too. These kind of projects connect linguistic skill and everyday sustainable practices. Another example in the slide 8 is the debates and discussions one. Students also participate in debates on topics such as responsible consumption, waste reduction, or ethical tourism. These discussions foster critical thinking, argumentation skills, and empathy. Empathy is pretty easy because Mexican people are warm people. It's easy to speak with Mexican, but our argumentation skills, you know, Mexican people always can made a lot of improvisation. They speak, they sing, they made a lot of joke. But when it comes to argumentation, it's pretty hard. And when we have a B2 level of DELF in the French exam, it's pretty difficult for them to argument during 20 minutes. It's pretty hard. These debates and discussions help learners develop informed opinions while practicing French in a natural, interactive way. You know, when you feel the urge, the necessity, you need to speak, to say, I am not agree. I can't. I can't wait to speak. It's pretty beautiful when you say it's pleasant. You see people wanting to speak when in other classes you say people just like, can you answer? No, I don't. You see them with a lot of motivation. It's a funny class. Well, we always have to set the context where people have to be respectful. It's in Colima, people are easygoing. They're not very violent, and so it's easy to stay polite. The last example is a campus flea market. It was pretty new when we started with that. We started with books because people, when they change classes, when just semesters or years, school years, they have to buy new books and it's pretty expensive. So we set for first time something 11, 12 years ago, we set the first flea book market where people can exchange, trade their book for other books or for some things, so for things that they have in their house. Every year, every semester, we made a flea market and we made it different. When Shine, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Chinese fast fashion site came in Mexico, a lot of people buy new clothes every week. So we decided to make a flea market with used clothes to say my rubbish can be treasure for you. So we've made a pasarela where people can make a défilé like in Europe where models walking with new clothes, and we made it in French. For example, you say what is impact with French? Well, the organization must be done in French. The défilé must be organized in French. The speaker must speak in French to present the défilé. And all the clothing, for example, a scarf, you've got to say it in French. So you learn a lot of vocabulary in context. Other flea market was a flea market was used to present the vegetarian food that we made. We made a kind of Thanksgiving that is not French. So we made a kind of French giving to say thank you to the earth, and offers other people vegetarian meals. It was a beautiful experience. The flea market is useful for students to practice communication skills such as negotiating, since we try not to use money, use pesos or euro. No, we try to trade. So we are going to bargain, to negotiate the value of the item and the value of my item. It's useful because people have to describe objects and interact with other customers. So at the same time, they promote principle of the circular economy. This activity blends civics engagement with authentic linguistic interaction. We try to develop resilience. Through these activities, learners develop both independence and adaptability. Collaborative tasks strengthens teamwork and problem-solving abilities. And by engaging with global issues, students cultivate emotional and cognitive resilience, which is essential in today's changing world. It's pretty strange, weird, because after COVID, we have a lot of a lot of people having issues with their relative skills, with emotional skills. They spend all the day long with earphone on ear and don't speak with nobody. So in the classroom, trying to make them communicate in the third language as their native Spanish speakers. They are English learners, and French is their third language. It's quite a challenge, you know. It's quite challenging, and it's very interesting because a lot of people don't want to speak with anybody. They just want to stay all day long listening music or watching Netflix. So it's the créer des liens, to create link between people, as we say in French, is challenging. The pedagogical impact, these initiatives transform language learning into an experiential, meaningful process. Students perceive French not only as an academic requirement, but as a tool for social and ecological action. Their engagement increases because learning is directly connected to reality, identity, and purpose. What is the teacher's role? In this model, the teachers act as a facilitator. We, as teacher, we guide reflection, we encourage creativity and support intercultural dialogue. We also connect classroom practices with campus or community initiatives, allowing students to see the real impact of their work. The great problem that we have in higher education is that it's a kind of hermetic world where teachers learn to teach to their learners, where they share their experience, their founding. It's always in the same sphere. We try to break the limits of that sphere. We are going to other communities, very poor communities around Colima. We walk. We have a project. We have one of those 27 project is trekking. We go on outside of the university, and we can make trekking. You know, we walk in in the in the in the in the mountains, and we see other communities, indigenous communities. In this model, the teachers guide reflection, encourage creativity, and support intercultural dialogues. We have a lot of challenges because teachers need training and in sustainability principles and interpersonal interdisciplinary approaches. We must balance linguistic objective with thematic contents, and long-term success requires institutional support and flexibility. In this framework, resilience means the ability to adapt, collaborate, and act responsibly. When linguistic, cultural, and ecological perspectives merge, education becomes transformative, and it's what we are looking for. Learners become more capable of navigating uncertainty and contribute to.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Our next speaker is here, and the title is Repairing Ruptures, Cultivating Resilience, Group Therapy as a Model for Connection in a Polarized World. Chris, if you would like to load your slides, please proceed. While you're doing that, I'll just say a little bit about the abstract. We live in a time of social division and uncertainty, as seen by conflicts like Ukraine, Russia, and Palestine, Israel. Political polarization in the United States and ongoing racial and indigenous justice struggles highlighted by movements such as Black Lives Matter and Idle No More. These conditions challenge our ability to stay in dialogue, build trust, and maintain connection. Resilience, often thought of as an individual skill, also requires relational repair. I think we're ready. Okay,
Oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm good to go.
Please
Awesome.
do.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So yes, repairing ruptures, cultivating resilience, really thinking about group therapy as a model for connection in our kind of contemporary polarized world. To all those points that you were just making, Jackie, I think Black Lives Matter, all of these kind of political divisions, and I think group is one way of kind of, yeah, addressing that. Talking a little bit about me, just introducing myself and some of my background in group, really more from a place of like why I'm passionate about group and why I think that that actually matters or is a way of kind of cultivating resilience, I think, to the theme of this kind of conference. I have a pretty strong background in group therapy. I've taught that at CityU, lots of experience in process groups, training groups of all kinds of different sorts, with American Group Psychotherapy Association, Eastern Group Psychotherapy Society, various conferences that I've gone to within that, including kind of Tavistock work and large group models in the UK. All of which I think just kind of gives me a stronger background in this stuff and some level of experience and reason why I think I might be a bit more passionate about it. And also really caring about ethics, I think would be the other piece that I maybe put into this stuff, sitting on the inquiry committee here in BC, the College of Health and Care Professionals. And before I kind of jump into more stuff, I also like to think a little bit about sociocultural transference in context. So acknowledging my position really as white, educated, middle class, cisgender, gay man, born, raised in Canada, recognizing that my experiences, my perspective, really comes from that kind of a place. And I think in the midst of that, just really inviting us all to kind of reflect on where it is that you're joining from, what positions maybe kind of inform your worldview, how it is that you actually experience group dynamics, the culture that kind of maybe frames that, how you interpret relational processes. And in the midst of that, really welcoming feedback about representation, microaggressions, anything that I might get wrong or right for that matter. That I think that we all have a relational lens. Being aware of difference, impact, and the importance of repair and interactions, I think is just so much of what our role can be as therapists, and especially within group processes. So feel free to send that my way. Leading just with some kind of learning objectives, something that I would hope that you can gain from the end of our time together here today. I'd hope that you'd be able to kind of describe some aspect of how group therapy fosters relational resilience through rupture and repair, identify some skills developed in groups that can support connection across difference, and apply any of those insights and understand maybe more than anything how group therapy can be applied to broader social, organizational, and professional contexts. Why does this matter? I think it's always kind of a prudent question for us to be thinking about and asking when we're learning, frankly, anything. But I think we really do live in a pretty polarized time. We certainly see this kind of idea come up a lot. There's division, tension, globally, locally. You know, we think about this at the kind of Thanksgiving or whatever other table we might sit at, right? But we equally see this with the conflicts and wars that are going on around us, whether that's Ukraine, Russia, the Israel-Palestine conflicts that are kind of ongoing, lots of the race-related, you know, stuff that is in our ether. These conflicts are around us. Indigenous justice struggles. I think they all challenge our ability to stay in dialogue, to maintain trust, and I think those pressures really demand relational resilience, the capacity to repair ruptures, sustain connection across difference. And I think that the need for that is more critical than ever. Dialogue can feel strained, trust is fragile, connection, I think, is easily disrupted. Yeah. So I think that's why I see this as at least important, and then really think group is one way of kind of moving toward that and addressing it, increasing our sense of resilience in the midst of that. So expanding resilience, you know, I think there's this maybe more traditional way of understanding that kind of as an individual skill, some way in which we survive and adapt. But I think that more powerful, perhaps, is a form of almost relational resilience. Where we think about relational repair, where we're facing rupture, reconnecting across difference. And I really think of that as a process of peopling, you know, including others as part of that process, not just going it alone and taking care of ourselves. And that capacity to face conflict is essential in both groups and wider society. And I think it's in these relationships, in places like group, that we have an opportunity to kind of exercise and flex those muscles, learn a little bit more. I really like this Harry Stack Sullivan quote. It takes people to make people sick, and it takes people to make people well again. And I know that that's maybe pulling a bit more toward the therapeutic angle here, a bit more toward pathology, but I think is really relevant when we're thinking about groups and the way in which they can teach us skills about cultivating resilience and well-being. Maintaining contact is one way to ensure that we can actually become well again, that we experience conflict and rupture in relationship, and we're going to experience repair, I think, in those spaces too. When we think about group therapy as a model, I think groups naturally expose differences and similarities. The early tasks of a group, I think, are often in finding similarities, but we quickly find our way to examining and finding difference between folks either. Those can be those really kind of obvious things of race, gender, age, things that people kind of really just kind of draw to. Or there were these bigger kind of pieces of political beliefs that I think can be a bit more rupturous within kind of group context. We expect that within any group. Conflict and misattunement are just going to be part of that process. The implicit task in my judgment of the group is to really learn to navigate that, to stay in contact despite these differences, to find our way through that, to stay in contact despite those differences, notice and name when connection is strained, and really practice not just repair, but even just tolerance of that difference, right? That we're not all going to agree about all things all the time, but that we can perhaps have more in common than not, and connect across these differences. So some examples, I think, of how these misattunements and experiences of rupture and repair might actually play out in group are things just as simple as being interrupted and the way in which that might actually kind of just irk, right? Cause some level of rupture in a relationship. Speaking up, saying something out loud, but that just landing in silence, not actually being heard and met in it. A change in topic so that I feel dropped and, again, not really met, as though people are ignoring me or not meeting my needs. So it's not always about these kind of other things, but I think within the group space, it can be about this here and now, the relationships that we're actually building and finding ourselves in. And we have this opportunity within the group space, this kind of social microcosm, to really work on those skills, to figure out how it is that when I feel this rupture, when I feel as though there's some issue between me and others, that there's a way for me to work that through too. So these moments are really opportunities to develop relational skills, staying present, repairing those ruptures, and continuing to engage. Um, yeah, and knowing that in speaking up in any way, I might risk withdrawal. I might risk others kind of pulling back. But I'm going to stay engaged anyway. Some of the skills that I think are developed in groups, listening across divides, tolerating ambiguity, seeking understanding, practicing repair. I think groups provide a rich environment to develop capacities that are useful well beyond the therapy room. Um, these skills are really interrelated as far as I'm concerned. So staying present in a tense moment requires tolerance of ambiguity as well as active listening. And over time, I think these abilities become really embodied, just much more kind of familiar to us, and supporting this relational resilience across contexts, which I think really speaks again to kind of the purpose of this conference and what we're thinking about. Why this matters beyond therapy, because I think that this social microcosm really does mirror any other social system, whether that's a family, whether that's the workplace, whether that's our communities, or even kind of broader social systems beyond that. And that I really believe in that transferable aspect. Skills learned in this space in a group therapeutic context are applicable across contexts. So the patterns that we see aren't just unique to the therapy room. All of these other places are places where we're going to be experiencing rupture and repair. And the skills that we therefore develop, I think, in group, staying present in conflict, repairing connections, tolerating differences, being able to kind of really flex our own muscle of being able to tolerate all of those feelings that otherwise we might withdraw, pull away from, or explode within, or feel as though we're going to. I think it's all kind of directly applicable to these other scenarios and settings too. So the group becomes that microcosm, offers a safer space to practice this form of relational resilience that translates well beyond therapy. Just going into a few case examples, I think be the bulk of the rest of the time that we have together. Thinking about when these things come up in my groups or experiences that I've had with them that I think speak to what this looks like and how it can play out. So staying through discomfort was going to be my first one. So a really kind of basic sense of something's uncomfortable, but I'm not going to just escape from that. I think we often avoid, we walk away, we create space from something as a way of tolerating it. And I think certainly as a psychologist, I know that that's not always our best kind of option. I think group offers us a space where we can really encourage that. And I think in the individual therapy context, for example, we don't necessarily have that same kind of discomfort. We tend to be able to escape a little bit more or be able to placate someone, meet someone where they're at. So group, I think, comes with a lot more challenge and a lot more opportunity for this kind of an experience. So here I'm talking about emotions that feel intolerable: shame, anger, boredom. Members keep coming to the group and continue to experience those feelings, even if they don't like them. Part of it's implicit in the group contract that you're going to keep coming, that learn to kind of engage in this process, name them, speak some of these feelings out loud if you feel able to. And with that, we can kind of increase our tolerance and capacity for that, inoculate ourselves in some way to, I think, some of the intensity of those emotions, that they don't have to have quite the pull and power over us that they once did. So over time, I think folks are really developing regulation, ambiguity tolerance, the ability to connect intention, the ability just to tolerate these feelings. So I really notice a lot of the time folks in group talking about how earlier on in the midst of stuff, it was really difficult for them to stay present. They really wanted to exit the group when there was these huge kind of conflicts or even minor conflicts. So it'll be months on that they'll be sharing how intolerable those moments were. That it was just really intolerable, but that they kept coming back. And that over time, kind of staying, normalizing to that, being able to see this other person or these other folks as kind of more human, learning to regulate themselves in the midst of that, becomes a skill that they can really just hold on to, that they don't have to kind of dissolve in the midst of tension or conflict. They can disagree, feel frustrated, misunderstood, or even just dysregulated, but remain engaged in some way, even if that engagement is just the silent participant that continues to stay through that discomfort. And I think with time, I do hear these kind of members talk about having a greater tolerance for ambiguity, their ability to be present in the midst of rupture, to stay connected even when it's uncomfortable. So I think that's really example of resilience in action, and resilience is capacity to stay in contact. A second example for me is this idea of choosing to leave. So I think that people have a lot of are quite authorized in choosing to be in a group or not. They have full choice. I can't make them do anything. So really the opposite, I think, of what I was just talking to, the idea of staying through discomfort. So sometimes leaving, I think, is part of that repair. Not every space is going to fit everyone. Withdrawal can be productive, discerning, a way of maintaining safety. And I really think of that as resilience, as boundary setting, authorization, self-authorization. So sometimes I think that's quite dramatic, right? Someone has like an explosive episode and chooses to walk out. Sometimes
2
that happens
minutes.
pretty quietly.
2 minutes.
2 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I skipped my slide. Anyway, so resilience is boundary and authorization. My last example here is just going to be finding a voice. So really learning to speak up. So sometimes you might enter withdrawn without words for what someone is able to actually kind of feel and experience. Early attempts to speak might come out as emotion, just tears or silence, confusion. But over time, there can be some movement, the ability to interrupt, to express disagreement, tone, and opinion. So I think that's really resilience, again, growing in real time. The capacity to stay emotionally connected while asserting difference. Yeah. Emergence of agency and differentiation. All of this to say relational repair as resilience. It isn't just kind of surviving on one's own, but it's kind of actively engaging with and staying in contact with others as a means of doing so. Engaging with rupture, repairing connections, and strengthening relational capacity. That I think all of that's modeled and experienced in group. And that I think that this therefore translates into society too. Much of what's lived in groups is also lived in society more kind of broadly. So in summary, group therapy is a microcosm of society. Relational repair is a critical component of resilience, and learned skills relate to broader social relevance. My last plug for joining a group, I really like this Yalom quote that every therapist should have a therapy group for themselves to prevent burnout and for continued professional and personal growth. So I think there's a lot of value in kind of exploring those avenues. And that's all. Look at that. Thank you.
That was perfect timing. Thank you so much. So now we get to the really, really fun part of every session. This is session 11. We have done this a few times. This is the Q&A. Now, we have had several recordings this round. However, we do have 3 of the presenters here live with us for Q&A. So I'm going to invite them to turn on their microphones and videos. And let's see who we have for questions. Go ahead, Dr. Domingo.
Thank you. Thank you to the presenters. This was wonderful. I appreciate the focus on resilience as an individual, sort of great. Let me ask a question that really encompasses all 3, but split into 2. So the first question is really directed toward Dr. McAdam, and I apologize if I pronounced that right. And Chris, you may also jump in on here. I appreciate both the focus on resilience building and the individual focus. And I wrote my question down here. I'll start with you, Dr. McAdam, and Chris, you can jump in. What sort of ways or examples can you apply resilience building in collective contexts or civic spaces, etc.? And Chris, you shared through group therapy, certainly, but other bigger spaces that resilience can be built. Oh,
I can't hear you, Dr. McAdam. And I'm not sure why, because you're unmuted. But I would just offer that I think any
yeah, go ahead and
context in
jump in,
which,
Chris, and Dr.
yeah,
McAdam.
any context in which we can have kind of bigger conversations. I still can't hear you. Any context in which we can have bigger conversations where we're getting people in contact with one another, I think is this opportunity for these conversations to be happening, where we can sustain difference and be in contact with people that aren't just the same as ourselves.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Dr.
Okay.
McAdam.
There you are. No.
No
Or
sound?
Now we're done.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's
That's
go
okay. We
to
can move
Dr.
on.
Nubla. Oh, did you have a second question, Dr.
I
Domingo?
don't, but I'll defer because I want the others
Yes,
to.
and we actually only have 11 minutes for Q&A this time.
Yes. Yeah, go
Normally
right
we have a
ahead.
little bit more time. Okay, so let's
Dr.
go to
Newell,
Dr. Nubla
please.
Kung. You had your hand up, and then Dr.
Yes.
Curry was next.
Yes, I actually have two questions, but again, just in the interest of time,
You'll probably be okay. You can go ahead and ask your
oh,
two questions.
okay.
You're okay.
So let me ask them both as we do, and so since Chris was just talking, Dr. Graham, yesterday we had a. I'd love your opinion on this. Yesterday we had a presenter who talked about curated loneliness and the and AI as sort of like a way to sort of connect with someone when they are not connecting with the world. And I love sort of your point is that is going into relational resilience, right? And so can you speak to maybe this rise of AI and the curated loneliness that comes from just really interacting with social media and all of that, and how your model sort of fits into all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd welcome others to contribute.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Oh, good. I had something plugged in I shouldn't have plugged in. Okay. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Please don't be sorry. No, and it's just Chris, not Doctor. But I now I've lost the question. I think that AI, I think that these kind of pieces, I think they're scary because I think that they do move us more toward loneliness and less connection with others, less connection with difference, and more just kind of time within insular think tanks. And I think this is a lot of the issue we're seeing with AI and AI products, right? It's just kind of affirmation, validation of what one already thinks. And I think unless we have the challenge of difference, we're just going to create more of that curated loneliness that I think you're speaking to.
Yeah, definitely. And I just it just was wonderful how yours sort of was like, this may be the answer to going into what she was talking about. And so I'm just gonna maybe defer my other question. It is to Taylor Callahan, but just to so that Jacqueline
Well, let's
McAdam
get
can answer.
Yeah, do you want me
Joel's.
to?
the original
I'll
question.
answer Joel's. I'm sorry about that. So, Joel, what comes to mind is the ability to increase sense of belonging within collective communities. So it sort of takes me back to the work that I did. I've done a lot in terms of I've done a lot of participatory research. And in doing participatory research, what we really do is create a collective consciousness. And if we look at sort of what we talk about now in terms of sense of belonging, that absolutely increases our sense of belonging. And if we look at what happens, are you familiar with participatory research?
Yes.
Yeah. So, everybody kind of, it's a collaborative, a collective consensus is built. And through doing that, the sense of belonging increases. So when you're working with groups of people, sort of related to that networks of support area that I talk about, building resiliency, I would look at how do you create and work on the similarities in the group as opposed to polarizing the differences in the group. Chris, do you have anything to say to that?
No, I love what you're saying. And that I think it should start with finding similarities, and then I think we can learn to tolerate the differences that are going to exist in any group because they'll be there, and then we can find similarities amongst these differences too.
Just a quick comment, and I'll get to the others. The comment and then the question, more rhetorical. How do you know when we've gotten there? And what if everyone has that sense of belonging? I'm just extrapolating. What then? And there's a sci-fi show that sort of mirrors.
How do you know if you've got there? Is that the question?
Yeah, it's more rhetorical. Just to
yeah, because the group takes care of itself.
Okay.
The group is so. Can I give a brief example? So
brief, because we have 6 minutes for the rest of the Q&A.
Okay, I won't. Joel, if you want to connect with me outside of that, I don't want to take other people's time.
No, absolutely. Would love to talk further. Thank you.
Feel free.
Okay, Dr. Carew, what have you got?
Yeah, I had 3 questions, so the 3, but maybe I should just go to
ask only one. You've got one.
Let me ask Taylor. She had a very interesting dissertation presented here. Taylor, my question to you is that yesterday there was a concept that was on sexual assault, that was developed around community resilience. Do you think that would work in your dissertation as a solution? If so, how? I think
Yeah, I think
there's quite a lot of debate about people don't want to report. They don't want to report. They know it's there. They don't want to report. So how can we use a community approach, community resilience, to solve the problem?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. And I really loved Chris, all the other presentations today for that reason too. I think they lend well to this question. I think that one of the issues that we see, particularly with male sexual abuse, is like this inability to talk about it. And when you can't talk about it or be vulnerable, then you don't feel like you have access to that type of community support or community resilience. And so I think I wasn't there for the other presentation that you're referring to. So forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but I guess I would say that I think like when I looked at the research, there's not a lot of research at all on like treatment or like solutions to this problem. Um,
Mhm.
the limited research that does exist that interviews male survivors those men tend to talk about group therapy as one of the most influential factors because it builds that community resilience because it creates an opportunity for that genuine human connection, that opportunity to have your story be not only heard but reflected in other people's experiences. And I think that like by choosing this capstone topic, I was really hoping to open up this dialogue and encourage kind of a welcoming of male victims into the conversation about sexual assault victimization, that it happens to them too, and that that community is just a huge important piece to this, but that there's factors I think particularly contributing to barriers for men to access that community.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a question in the chat for Dr. McAdam. In what ways can the resilience framework you outlined be implemented within Canadian higher education to empower minority groups in overcoming systemic barriers?
Who asked the question?
Maika.
Hi, Micah. Well, the framework really could be done in a number of ways. I mean, it could be turned into a workbook. It could also be done, when I worked a lot more with youth, I used to just discuss the concepts with groups of youth. So, many of the groups that I ran groups through the Y, I ran groups through my counseling practice that I was doing. And groups are a lovely way, as both Taylor and Chris have discussed, of people reflecting on their stories and not only having their stories heard, but having their stories validated. And so as a facilitator, you could weave in the different aspects of the framework as you ran the group. And so often, are your higher education, you said, like universities or secondary? What was the question about? Was it higher? Sorry.
Higher ed for universities, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great question. I would have to, if there could be a proposal out there to do something like this, but I think understanding the principles that I have written about in my book is sort of the first step, and then integrating those into your practices, whether you work as an instructor, whether you work as a counselor, kind of thinking about the different principles that I talked about and how those can be in the forefront of your mind as you're delivering as an instructor or a counselor, I think is maybe the first step. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Dr. Demeke, last question.
It's going to be a quick one. Probably will come across as a bit pedantic, and this is for Taylor Callahan. In terms of using Foucault, I know there are divergent views about the efficacy of using Foucault in these kinds of matters, precisely because that Wittgenstein idea of language does not only describe reality, but it creates it, right? But Foucault doesn't seem to have a moral foundation, so that we can't really follow him all the way to how did you find navigate that at all, if at all?
In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds. That's a fair question. I think it's maybe my bias that I credit it to Foucault. My undergrad is in sociology. And so he's a huge figure. And so I think like my lens of looking at dominant discourse and how that impacts various things that we face in society has just been heavily shaped by his work through my undergrad. So that's kind of what I'll say about that in 30 seconds.
Fair enough.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic job. Excellent timekeeping all. We are at time. We have a half-hour break and we're going to go into our final session of this wonderful 3-day conference. I will